Well, let's unpack some of that speech with our French politics editor, Marc Perelman, who's with me. And Marc, just on the optics of this, first of all, I mean, 3 standing ovations. I don't know if you can recall images like that in your time covering French politics, but it really seems like France wants to say, look, we are standing with the Ukrainian people here.
Yes, I mean, there were more solemn moments after terrorist attacks and so on where, people were standing together and so on. But it was a very different scene because France had been struck by a terrorist attack. There, it's really to show solidarity to Ukraine. You already had last week the French president speaking in front of 3 flags, the usual French and European flags, and adding the Ukrainian flag. And today you had the Ukrainian flag, you had the Ukrainian ambassador attending as a VIP, I should say, this debate in Parliament. And also you had this quite emotional moment where there was a standing ovation for a man who's not in the room, and for obvious reasons, Ukraine's President Vladimir Zelensky. So yes, a round of applause and a rare show of unity and often fractious French National Assembly. But this was the idea of this debate. I mean, other members of parliament, the leaders of each parliamentary group, are now starting to deliver their speeches, but we can expect more or less some kind of harmony, if not total unity on this issue. Unity is something Jean Castex said was clearly important in those very dark hours.
And unity against Vladimir Putin. I mean, he was very clear. Vladimir Putin has lied, he said. What do you make of language that strong against the Russian leader?
Well, because it's personal, not to Jean Castex, but to Emmanuel Macron. We know, because he's publicized this, that the French president tried over and over again to convince Vladimir Putin not to send his troops, his tanks, and his planes into Ukraine. He went to the Kremlin, spoke 5-6 hours with Vladimir Putin. He spoke to him on the phone repeatedly, and he was given, and Jean Castex made reference to that, assurances that Russian military exercises in neighboring Belarus would soon wrap up, and that once they wrap up, Russian troops would withdraw. This didn't happen, and so there is a kind of personal dimension to that, that yes, the French know firsthand that Vladimir Putin lied straight-faced, and that he's been doing so. Nevertheless, I should add, the French president continues to speak to Vladimir Putin. They had a phone call yesterday because Emmanuel Macron, as Jean Castex referred, is trying his best, if not to prevent war because it's too late, but now to try to end it in a way that's acceptable to Ukraine, obviously, but especially to Vladimir Putin, who still holds the cards, obviously.
And finally, briefly, if you can, Marc, there was a message there from Jean Castex to the French people as well, saying the government is doing what it can to shield the French economy from the potential blowback of the sanctions that are being imposed on Russia. What do you make of that, particularly in the context of the election coming up?
Well, I think it's important. Obviously, people will focus on what he's saying about Ukraine, about this announcement of 300 million euros of aid to Ukraine. But clearly, the backlash of the sanctions and the risk that it could be felt by French citizens at a time where petrol prices are already going through the roof is a concern for the government. They say, we will shield you in the same way we protected you during the pandemic. You know that the government will do its utmost to protect them. Obviously, it's a sensitive issue just before the presidential election. Right now, everyone is focused on Ukraine. But the issue of purchasing power, the issue of inflation will probably take center stage very soon. And if there are immediate consequences of the sanctions slapped against Russia on financial markets, but also on the way French spend money to run their cars or their factories, this could have an effect. And that's something Emmanuel Macron wants to avoid at all costs, if I may use that expression, as he prepares to throw his hat into the ring. The deadline for declaring candidacy is this coming Friday.